Welcome, everyone. My name is Idit Solomon. I am a rabbi and the founder of Hasidah. I'm joined here by Riva Judas, who will introduce herself in a moment. We are here to present to you tonight about pregnancy and infant loss, part of the Awareness Month, and specifically a focus on kind of that loss, what's happening, and some of the ways that ritual can be part of the healing process. As I am the founder of Hasidah, our connection to this is that we focus on infertility and other challenges to building your family, which a large part of that is when people have a pregnancy end for a variety of reasons, and sometimes recurrent pregnancy loss can become a condition of infertility. So we offer other support and other programs in the realm of trying to build a family. And one of the pieces of that is dealing with miscarriage and other pregnancy loss. So with that, I will pass this to Riva to introduce herself.
Thanks so much, Idit. I'm thrilled that we're doing this program together. I'm Riva Judas. I am the founder and director of Nechama Comfort. We are now a global organization. One of my case managers told me that we're in every continent except Antarctica, and that due really because, unfortunately, the pandemic forced us to be on Zoom, but we're able to communicate and help so many families. We work with the entire family. First and foremost, the couple experiencing the loss. We work with families, early miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, SIDS, through the age of 1 to 2 years old. And we help them as soon as they reach out to us. If there are logistics involved in helping with the burial, helping with communicating their loss to family or friends. We offer individual counseling through our case managers, as well as weekly support groups, both in the afternoon and evening to help all the different time zones. We also have a monthly men's group, and we also have pregnancy after loss. And we work also with the couple first and foremost, but we know how important it is to offer the support, the guidance, the tools to the grandparents, to the siblings of the family, to the children, both if there's children now in their family or later on. We really help to give them the choices how to put this child, whatever stage the loss was in, into their lives and to move through it. And I think, just to mention again, we've done programming throughout the year, but October is Pregnancy Loss and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And it's been around actually since 1988 when Ronald Reagan wrote it into law. And so many people don't know about it. But with programming like this, with organizations like yours, collaboration, and really helping to help this community, that's our goal, for people not to feel alone. So thank you.
Great. So I'm going to move with that and kind of talk about the context of our program tonight. Looking at the people who signed up, I think a lot of people who are here in attendance with us this evening have unfortunately had the experience. I think a lot of the population tonight, in part because of working with Hasidah, is about miscarriage. We do know that this does also deal with miscarriage and stillbirth, I should say, but we do recognize you work with infant loss and beyond, which is really well. So I'm going to speak a little bit about who's here and what we're going to do and how it's going to work. So we do have people who have experienced loss with us for sure. And I know we also have some people who are friends and family of others who have gone through loss and are interested in understanding what they're going through, which is really helpful. So it's still speaking to them because then they can hear this and understand, and we can address questions they have, which reminds me that if you do have questions to our listeners, if you have questions, please submit them in. You should see the name Meira. She is one of our co-hosts. please submit questions to her. As we go, she'll filter them to myself and Riva if we're going to answer them based on what we're talking about. But if you have other questions to where we're going, or you want to make sure, we're going to reserve some time at the end to make sure we can address your questions if we didn't already. So feel free to put that in the chat as we go along and send that to Meira. So back to kind of the context. One of the things that's interesting about the fact that we're doing this is, I know for myself, having gone through miscarriages, and I know, Riva, you also have loss, is that it's not something that people really talk about much until you're in it. And even if they do, it's very hard to understand. So part of this is that it's a very painful situation, and it's not a common knowledge thing. Like, there's many things we kind of understand, but this isn't it. And the other thing is, I know when people talk to me, I notice that they seem to have some assumptions about how I was going to feel or how I may be reacting. And sometimes I may have been in that characteristic emotion or state, but other times I wasn't. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Jewish experience. We're going to get to ritual, but I want to start there. Because I know a lot of times that's definitely your specialty, is when people have just experienced a loss. So I'm curious, I've talked to many people, but I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are, kind of without necessarily going into about what they're going to do about it, what they're coping, but what has your been experience about the variety of feelings that people have when this happens to them? Because I don't want to say, what do people feel? Because the truth is, I know there's not one answer. So can you talk a little bit about what are the different ways that people are feeling when they're going through this? And I also just want to say one more thing is, it's not a moment. It's not like you have this moment. So I recognize, like, as we continue to talk about this, there are also different phases. So can you just start our conversation with, break us open? What are the feelings that the people go through?
So that's an amazing point, because just to touch base what you said before, that we're going to focus tonight a lot on miscarriages, but really what we find with, for example, our support group is one group. It's couples that experience early miscarriage through the age of 1. It's one group, because really what we find is that when families reach out, they are acknowledging the loss of a child. It's the loss of the child at any stage, and of their hopes and dreams. So the grief process and the journey are similar in the fact that they're so different. And what I mean by that is, I too, my firstborn son lived for 12 hours, passed away, which is a loss of a child. And we also, my husband and I, had 6 miscarriages, a loss of a child. And there are differences, but what the feelings are is that this loss of a pregnancy loss is unique, because the feelings, just like it's unique because it's happening to 2 people. It's sudden. It's things that people grieve that many young people have never experienced. But just like any other loss and being part of a grief journey, it is so different. How people are going to react, we know, or people that, Psych 101, in high school and college, we're told that there are stages of grief. And we know that Kubler-Ross came out with this, and we soon realized, people that were going through the grief, but now officially, there are no stages of grief. There is anger, there's denial, there's questioning, there's acceptance, there's bargaining. And that's just the official ones. We can all create our own lists. But what we know is it's on an individual basis. And one reason you could feel that way in the morning, and 2 hours later feel something else. And what makes it a unique loss is that you and your partner could be feeling something the same or different. And it's hard, I think, for people, for the community, family, and friends to understand that. And that we don't walk around with grief on our sleeves. We walk around, we don't wear morning suits. We don't walk around in black. I always try to wear something bright. In fact, when I do these presentations, today I'm actually wearing pink and blue dress because it's Pregnancy and Loss Awareness Month. But because we're not walking around showing our feelings on our sleeve, maybe, but maybe we will be. And I
So
think
what are some of those feelings that someone may have on their sleeve?
you could be, you're sad, you're angry at everyone. God plays a big part in that too, that anger. You're questioning, why me? Even we find families that have a medical reason, which more and more today, thanks to medical advancement, we find out, we don't know the real reason. Why me? It's the guilt. If only ... Everybody has that. I should have, I could have, it's their fault, whoever they are. And that's just some of the feelings that we're wearing on our sleeve. Or maybe for who we are, our own individual personality, we're able to accept it. We have faith, we have a support that is inward, that we've gone down these journeys before or not. So it's a quick acceptance of it. It's such a wide range of feelings. I think you probably have that same feeling and to people.
There is a range. I know that when I was going through this, and sometimes I hear from other people, but they're not able to articulate, is a couple things. And one is, if I get this wrong, if there's therapists in the room, I apologize, but it's somewhat of an ambiguous loss. Like, I had lost a family member before this, but there was, and of course, the process of the miscarriage actually made it real to some degree. But as I was going through it in some of the phases, one of the things I wasn't expecting was kind of confusion, because it was also this, you mentioned it, Riva, was the loss kind of the hope of the dream. It was the loss of this expectation. It was just this loss that had no place. And we'll get to that later in the ritual, but I think that was really confusing to me. And there'd be sometimes when I would go through moments which seemed, and I saying in the safety of this place, where I almost could forget about it. Like, if the pain went away for like a half an hour, and then like I got up to move and I felt it again, it's like, oh, right, I just had a miscarriage. And it was like, some of my feelings were like a physical disorientation, like the hormones going through me. And so there was, some of my feelings were confusion and this, again, I don't know how to say it, but this ambiguous loss. And I also want to say, I think that for others, maybe, but for some people, the miscarriage definitely is the loss of this pregnancy. It's the loss of that potential. But I also felt that it was part of my infertility experience. Like, it was also like, oh my gosh, what if this never happens? And I would get like scared, which is not something that people commonly identify, I think, with a miscarriage, is this fear of what if I can never have a kid? What if this happens again? And then yet again, like, then there could be another hour later where I shockingly could forget for an hour, like I'm eating dinner or I'm watching TV, and then like you get up and it comes back again. And it was very disorienting to have like sadness and grief and then confusion and then this physical disorientation. So there was quite a variety of things that I know for me that I felt going on when I was going through this. And you mentioned,
I'm sorry. I think, it's also the difference in time. I've been doing this a long time, but my miscarriages were 25 years ago. Between 25 and 35 years. So it was the way it was treated, and even in the medical world, it was, just go home, have your procedure, like a wart being removed, and don't discuss it. So I felt like that because I physically I was feeling something, but there was no place to even talk about it or to understand what I was going through, that it wasn't sort of accepted as a loss. But then, and I think nowadays, where people know they're pregnant, especially when you're on infertility treatment, it's so precise that you know exactly when you're pregnant, and the gender so early, so that attachment is there. And it's sort of that you need a place to understand for yourself what is happening, and that you can feel okay. And it is, and as you mentioned, which is a big part, it's the hormones going through it too. You're physical, you can't run away from it. And that's why we always see the difference between men and women, as much as they want to be understanding, but you can't go away from what's happening to you physically as well. So I
Right.
agree, it's a lot combined, that's going through your heart and your brain and your body.
So I want to take what you just said and kind of move that to the next step. Because and I agree with you, by the way, and I do think people talk about it nowadays. And that's kind of like our next step, because even when I was going through it, it didn't mean I wanted to share about it. And I knew I had friends who knew I was going through this, and I still didn't want to talk about it. And in part, it's because I was just afraid they would say the wrong thing. I was afraid, like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid to open up because I just may never be able to pull myself together. So I get it, that talking to people, and some people are comfortable with that, but I want us to talk a little bit about, so if we're having all these feelings, what are some of the ways, besides ritual, we're going to get to that. I know I keep holding that out. We're going to hold out on that.
Right.
So what are some of the practical ways, though, that we, like, what is it we're doing? I guess I would say, like, what is the purpose? What are we trying to do? What's the goal of even like moving through these emotions? What are we trying to accomplish together? How do we cope?
I think that's the first thing, that we can talk about it. We have been given the permission in society, and we'll talk about that later too, with the ritual and what's going on in the world, but the permission to talk about it, to put this into your life and to move through it. You never move past it. And it's amazing when I talk to, community awareness programs like this, or individual families that have, lost a baby at some point. And then let's say the grandparents come on. How many times do people tell me, 40 years ago, I had a miscarriage, or, I couldn't talk about it. So I think what we're trying to do is to normalize it, that this is your new norm, and that there's no right or wrong. I always use the word choices. That you have a choice to how you feel, but you need to discuss it. And if that means between you and your partner, you and your other family members, and I think by understanding what choices you have, and giving the couple, the individuals, the sense of you're in control of this, and it's okay to feel bad. And to feel good, to have to show them all these emotions that it's okay to have. And to also make sure that, I don't know if any doctors are on here either, but they've come a long way, but to make the medical world understand what it means to have a procedure. Couples will reach out to me and say, our doctor just gave us 3 choices. We could do this, I'm 6 weeks pregnant, I'm miscarrying, and next week we're scheduled for, that never was the case when I was having my procedures and my losses with my miscarriages. It happened right away. So on one hand, the procedure, you didn't have time to process, but you also was able to deal with it quicker when you have to have these choices. And doctors need to be aware of it too, that it's a combination. And it's important if you've chosen to share with people, what that means, that the community and the family members need to understand, and we'll talk about that, and we'll have the do's and the don'ts, that to understand that when you have that heartbeat, or you have that positive on that stick, that a miscarriage is a medical term. That's a term to miscarry, but really, and if you're okay with that, I have people that say, I'm fine with it. I have a beautiful family, living children. I had one miscarriage, in the beginning, but they still talk about it. When they're in conversation with me, they will make sure to say, but I had miscarriage, it didn't affect me, but it's still in their thoughts. And I think that's important too, to sort of normalize it. And to let the family and people know they have the choices.
One of the things that you just said that really stood out to me, you slipped the word acceptance and accepting your feelings. I think that one of the reasons that we're talking about having ritual is because we want to jump to that, but the truth is we have to understand, what do we want that ritual to accomplish? And part of it is for us to come to terms to reality. And it's really hard when you experience a pregnancy loss, because for many people, the world is broken. Like, there's a need to fix something. So often we don't talk about like losing or loss. Like, it's like, well, I learned something, what can I gain from this? But this is just a loss, and something is broken. And the other thing you said, which stood out to me, was the control, because this is so often beyond our control.
Yeah.
And I think there are many purposes for us working through it and why we want ritual. And I think part of it is, in whatever way that we are going to move through and accept this loss. I think one of the most painful things for me as an observer, people who works through this, is when I see people who years later have not accepted the loss. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't still be sad. I get it. Like, you can still be sad, but it's like they're in denial that it happened. And denial has a purpose, but I think that acceptance really stood out to me, as well as control. I think also is when we go through any loss, it's natural to kind of question meaning. What am I doing? What am I going through? Why am I even trying to have kids? Like, a lot of meaning and purpose just get broken in the process. And it's really important that part of the working through, which leads to then us wanting a ritual, is how do we rebuild that again? One of my teachers that I respect so much, Dr. Rabbi Rachel Adler, talks about boundaries. It was one of the founding teachers for me, and that we need boundaries because they kind of contain us, but they can't be solid, because then we can't breathe. Things have to be let in and out. Yeah. And the idea of a pregnancy loss, it's like the boundaries just completely are broken. And if we try so hard to put them up again, we block ourselves off. And if we don't put them up, we just turn into mushy nothingness. And I think a lot of times when we're trying to cope with things, we want to talk with people. It is that sense of, how can I build relations back up again? How can I normalize, as you said, because things are broken, and that talking with other people kind of helps me rebuild those boundaries, helps me remember meaning, helps me get the mourning and the lament out of me, so that I can kind of reconstruct. Because I find, for me personally, and for many clients I'm going through, what I'm saying I recognize is not what people articulate, but I do think I sense that that's what many people are going through. And a lot of what we're doing is helping them move through that in the process of talking with people, whether it's a therapist, as you said, or community members or friends or family members. I think we do some of that rebuilding. It's not replacing, it's not, as you said, but it's also not denying. It's one of the beautiful things I also like about the Jewish tradition, is that our rituals are very much based on facing reality. Like when we think about in a traditional burial, and when you have Shiva in the morning, it's about facing it and coming to terms with it, and accepting that we have to figure out how to move on and rebuild, move through. I don't want to say move on, because that almost makes you don't leave it behind, but how do you move through? So I would then like to shift, if it's okay, I know this is kind of your specialty, and it's one of the things that I also very much like is that we are Jewish organizations, and we know that Judaism has a lot to offer to address these needs. So I know you've worked with so many clients and have so many interesting ways, and I know that nothing does this the same for any one purpose. What have been some of your experiences with your clients that have really stood out to you as being, again, not effective for everyone, but effective for some people or meaningful for them? Can you share? I think people are going to really find it valuable to learn from your experience.
I definitely want to, that's the truth, that it's the choices. And that, one of the things, when it happened to me, and really not so much with my miscarriages, because we were not given as many opportunities as they are now. But I think that it's so important to understand that in Judaism, when it comes to the loss of a baby under 30 days, which means early miscarriage up to 30 days, that there is no guidelines for us. There is no Jewish law that tells us anything about the mourning, about Shiva, about burial. Really, very little details are described on what to do. And I remember that was something that bothered my husband and I very much, because there was no guidance. There was anger. I had a lot of anger. Why didn't I get to sit Shiva? Why did I'm mourning, what I wanted to say was, I was a kindergarten teacher, and the attachment of the baby and the thinking of the way we grow up is we're playing house, how we're growing up, and we're finding our life and our partner, etc. And then we're going to have children, and we're going to live happily ever after. And as we get older, we learn about the life cycle and grief and death, but there's no guidelines for us. So what to do? And what I finally accepted, it took me time, it took me people helping us, and I'll acknowledge my dad, who is a rabbi, Rabbi Simply Green, who's on tonight, and many other clergy that helped me understand was maybe God, and there is anger with God that comes with it. Maybe he understood a little bit that don't give me, if we were forced into the Jewish law of availance, of mourning, how much more difficult that would be. Think about the physical, what we've just gone through physically, medically, and that added guilt, anger, etc. So here we are back to the choices. And I think that's what's so important to know, that all the rituals are allowed. And if we, and I say this, and I tell this to my clients at any stage, that what we're going to discuss in a second about the different rituals and the different ideas, not to feel guilty if it's a loss that happened to you and you did not embrace that, you didn't have the knowledge of that, you did nothing wrong. For example, when I was having my miscarriages and my procedures, there was nothing offered about burial of what the medical world calls a fetus. I call it a child. So the babies were buried wherever they were buried, whatever, cemetery the hospital was using to do that. So it's never too late to embrace a ritual. And that's what we help with clients too, to reach out and not to say no, feel guilty, because you may, but how are we going to take what you did and what you didn't do? So that's why it's really important to get word out, to reach out to you, to me, to other organizations for help, but not to add this more to guilt, that there's always time. So do you want me to share some of these ideas now?
Well, I'd love to. I just want to add two things to this to add some context. And one is, I feel like there's somewhat of, for me, there's an elephant in my room anyways. And I feel like today in the climate we are in the United States of America, it's kind of hard not to talk about these issues of loss without understanding the debates we have in our country about, what is a life, when it is a life. And there are, the reason I want to bring it up is because I do think that there's especially with what you said, there isn't a Jewish way to do this. There isn't the Jewish way to do this, because you could see the lack of ritual. I'm going to digress for a second and go back to that. Is that some people felt like, wait, I can't do this, I can't do that. And it used to be that if you weren't required, you couldn't. And I think nowadays we've come to recognize if you're not required to observe Shiva or you're not required to do these things, it means today we say, well, I can, I'm not required. And there was a very practical reason for that. And that was that if you had the rates of pregnancy loss that were happening 1,000 years ago, people would be mourning all the time.
Right.
It's very different today. So I do love that you pointed out that we have permission. But one of the things that also comes up though, there's not the Jewish way to observe this, is there are some things that there is a Jewish opinion about, a minimum of which we all agree about, and the rest which is definitely debatable. But that it is that early pregnancy loss in Judaism is considered really kind of a loss of a part of a woman's body. And as that develops later, there are differing views in Judaism. And I feel like it's really important to recognize that sometimes our relationship to this potential life, people feel more comfortable calling it a fetus. And some people have already moved to the fact that this is going to be a successful pregnancy and it will be a child, and they want to call it a child. I think that it's important to recognize that how we relate to that process, one, does have theological implications. It's okay. I'm just saying that they're there. And to recognize that that's also going to shape our relationship to, it may inform how we want to heal and what ritual we may want going through this, how we relate to the pregnancy, how we relate to the loss. I had some experiences when I was going through pregnancy where people would counsel me to think of my pregnancy in a certain way, which felt extremely uncomfortable to me. And I realized afterwards that informed how I dealt with the loss of the pregnancy as well, because of how you perceive it and your connection to it. And even if you do have a theological opinion about this, and if you want to consider that Jewish tradition, again, there's no limits to what you're still allowed to be sad. There's no Jewish law of sadness. And I just want to open that door up and say that it's okay if people who are here have differing views on later stages of pregnancy loss, but there's no monopoly on sadness and loss. No matter what it is, it's a loss. So I just want to kind of name those things so that people, mostly just to release, because sometimes we hold those beliefs we don't realize, and they kind of constrict our, for example, if you kind of feel like, well, it's just a potential life, it didn't really have a soul yet, I shouldn't be mourning. First of all, I just said should, which is a good indication. Again, it doesn't take away the need still to grieve and be sad and move through that. So yes, then I just wanted to name that and then say, yes, tell us what some of the rituals
are. So I agree. And again, just to repeat, what you said is so true. And that's why it's so individual. And that's why you and your partner may be experiencing different too.
Totally different. Yeah.
So again, it's the choice. It's individual. That's why sometimes I'll get a phone call. Can you send me a informational book packet? Without even, I say, no, we really need to talk to you. And that's why I have my great case manager team, because we have to know what your experience is, what your life is experiencing. That's why there's no right and wrong. And just to please, if you're on here, know somebody or community, or yourself, open up to somebody, not to hold it in, because we hear you and we respect you. So I love the way how you put that, and that's what it's all about here. Again, and these are just choices, suggestions, that have helped many families. We welcome, I'm constantly for my clients, and the few things I'm going to share on the pictures in a minute is things from them, actual things that are happening every day.
Do you want us to show those? Do you want to help show
yeah.
those? Great.
Mira,
Okay, so
thank
we've
you.
made some lovely slides to help kind of
Yes,
use some
I give credit to my
real life examples of what people have done.
right. So again, this is what's on our slides all the time, individual. So I'll start with the first one. This is our son. My husband's on here too, Danny. Our son, Pesach. He was born on Passover. His name is Pesach. And a candle, I have an electric candle lit for the month of October. This is downstairs in my living room. And let me say, there was a time not so long ago that I would have not been comfortable, even in my position, to show this in my living room. This would have been hidden. But his picture is always up. In our day, we had one Polaroid picture, which was hard to imagine. Today, we were able to remove the tube. And that's important too. Many, hopefully today, the 90% of hospitals, they are on top of it. The team has been trained to deal with loss, perinatal loss. So even early miscarriage, where today the sonograms happen so much earlier, the sonograms are so much detailed, the heartbeat. There are so many, we get recordings of the heartbeats. There are so many things that couples receive, even early on for miscarriage, that can be saved and displayed. And these are the choices. So it's very important for you or for somebody close to the family, even you try to appeal to the doctor's office, when they hear about the loss, miscarriage, even this, to take any of those memories. And it's okay, according to Judaism, to take anything at any stage. You know, normally we don't photograph a baby that passed away, but it's important to keep these memories that are given to you, these mementos. If you're not able to take them, we've taken them. Find somebody to get. So at some point, because I can almost guarantee you will create your own memory box for yourself. Oh, just to go back for a minute, Mira. Okay. So that's one thing. People, the bottom one, I was just at a conference now, I just saw this. If you don't have anything concrete, and at any stage you could create this plate and you could put details on it. This is a client of ours, Perel Heck, who she writes beautifully about her journey, the last few years, her losses. I went to visit her in Milwaukee this year. This is her daughter, who was already born when their daughter passed away. Together as a family, she has two other sons and her husband, created this beautiful shadow box of the baby that was lost. So that's just showing how to put the family into it and how it continues. And Peril also has beautiful writings, which she's done, which we share on our website. Okay, next slide, please. One of our families has a child, and I'll show later on what they did last week. It was obviously October 13, 2021, so it's just a year of the date that the baby was born, Ella, and the baby passed away. We do in New Jersey have a section for a baby cemetery, and these are babies at any stage, miscarriages as well. Many Jewish cemeteries do have an area section. So here's just an example of a tombstone, which was interesting because if you go to an old Jewish cemetery, you will see headstones on babies in the late 1800s, 1900s. It was common to do this. And then because society sort of didn't accept it, Judaism also did it. But to any type of a stone, any type of marker that's created or not created, this is a professional, but we've seen markers that families have created with their own rock gardens. Children have created many different things as well. On the bottom is a family that I met. I was at the a conference, Pregnancy Loss International Alliance conference last week. Met this couple. The woman on the left had a stillbirth and a few miscarriages 30 years ago. Her daughter wrote a book about being, she was 4 years old when this happened, and she wrote a book, Goodbye Sister. There's not a lot of literature, but there is more and more to share with the families. And I love this picture because it was a continuation with her baby, the grandchild, and how this book was written, and they put that story into it. Okay, next. So there's other people, there's ways people are creative. They have writings, they have music, they have talents that have been able to be shared. So the book beforehand is an example. If there is pain like my pain, groups of people's experiences, women, men, siblings that were born afterwards. And we have a copy of that too. We didn't talk about the mikvah yet as a way to go to put their grief into it and move through it. But this is an organization called the Eden Foundation that has, it's called Birkat Amunah, prayers of faith. And it's a resource, as you see, to help go through your fertility and your loss journey with beautiful things that speak to many different people. And the third one, next slide, is an example over here, more public. These were some personal things to embrace, to write for yourself in a journal or to share it. Personal. This on the left is a family who actually experienced the loss of a child who was 14 months old. But they publicly talked about it. And this was a day of celebration that they have in their community. They're in the Syrian community, which another, has never not been talked about, but have shown families that you could talk about pregnancy loss. And they have a day of celebration of their son and a run, and they raise funds in memory of Michael. And that's just something that probably would have never been done a few years ago. The quilt is part of an October event. This is the Resolve for Sharing quilt that happens in many communities and hospitals, where, and you can find out locally too, where people have created quilts every October for pregnancies that have never been memorialized, have never had a ritual. And if you go to hospitals pre-COVID that do have a bereavement department, these quilts are there and displayed during the month. And that's also just down there was the advertisement for the event, for the run for Mike, the bike for Mike. All right, do we have one more slide? So this was something that happened last week. As you can see, October 15th is Pregnancy at the Loss Awareness Day in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. We're all aware that everything is pink during, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which is an important topic. Stacy, who's I think on tonight on our left, reached out to the mayor of her local town and said, we want something lit up for us too as well. And we came together, as you could see, on October 15th called Waves of Light, which we invited people individually, virtually, that I know did it, personal, that maybe they've never discussed it. Maybe it's something between them and a husband, something to share with their family. We came together, there's myself, my husband on the left, and some of our clients remembering their losses, choosing if they want to say the name for their loss. So this is more of a public. Is there another slide or? Okay, and these are some comfort care packages that we offer to our clients that help them to create rituals. We have a candle in there, we have a journal in there. We try to do it on an individual basis, what's going to speak with them as well. And it's interesting, that's what we said before. And another thing to bring up is Again, there's personal rituals, there's personal things that are created individually in the family, and there's public, and both are choices. We encourage, we offer the choice so that families, even in a miscarriage, can offer their baby, if they choose, an identity, which means you can name your baby, you can name your child, if that's going to help you. And even an early loss, and it could be a personal name, it could be, if it was a holiday, when it happened. I remember each time my 6 miscarriages happened. Actually, one happened this week, the week right after Sukkot. Another one happened Thanksgiving Eve, which is coming up. I can tell you what happened in the news in those days as well. But you could give yourself in your head if that's going to help you. And again, it's public displays and it's personal displays.
So I thank you so much for sharing all of those really meaningful ways that people processed and moved through. I want to add a few more. And I'm just looking at the time, and I know in a couple minutes, I want to switch to see if there's any questions.
Right.
I want to answer one of them in advance, but I know that a few other ritual things or Jewish things in particular, we'll read that in a second. We have a question coming in, is in part something very meaningful, is borrowing from some of the ways that we would observe any loss. And one of them is very simply to give tzedakah, to give to charity. And and particularly is a pregnancy loss, if it is to a pregnancy loss organization, that's fine. But also if it's something to one of the potential parents to say, I know this is important to you, and it's something that I know you want to live on and carry on beyond you. So I'm donating to help that come true while you're experiencing your loss. Another thing, which I hope doesn't sound cliche or trite, but is recognizing that when we help other people, it helps us. And one of the ways is, it's just a Jewish thing to do any act of social justice. Sometimes I feel like we're counterbalancing the world. When the world seems broken, do something to fix it, but do it with the intention that that's exactly what you're doing. Sign up for something and do something and say, in this world, which feels broken to me, I'm going to take this step in honor of that. Another thing I think to do is to help others and to help yourself is to talk about what is happening in your community for this. There are larger Jewish communities where organizations can work with hospitals to deal with miscarriage, with pregnancy loss. Some cemeteries can actually do an appropriate burial of tissues, which very few people know what to do. And the majority are not buried. So one of those to help others is to talk about, is that in your community? To find out at the cemetery, if there is not even a plot, can there be a marker made? Some of the rituals that I know have been very meaningful for many people is having a day in your community, if it is October 15th, where you have a memorial. And if it is going to a place in a cemetery or a particular garden, and for example, laying a stone, just kind of that sense of permanence that we do with laying a stone is a very Jewish tradition. And in some communities, for example, if this is for you, they plant a tree, which is something that's often done in honor of a child being born. I think all the more so if a child has been lost, or pregnancy has been lost, again, to make something that grows in this world. And it could be something, again, that you can go back in future years or whenever you need, and you add a stone around the base of that tree. I think many of those traditions can be done personally. If you want to plant a tree in your backyard, or create a little stone memory garden, whether it's just for yourself or that place, or if it's in the community. We also have an article that we just released, and I I meant to apologize. The person, one of the people who we had wanted to speak was not able, was part of building one of those community memorial places and was going to talk about that process. It's a bit, it's a lengthy process, but the point is it's a healing process. But we also have an article we published this month by someone who went through it, and during her time, she processed it by taking a lot of walks. And on her walk, she collected flowers and dried them out. And her kind of marker, the stone setting for her, was to create a picture out of these dried flowers. So it really doesn't have to be, and there's something to that also, because the fact we use stones, it was something she could keep permanently. Something to remember, interestingly, I thought for her, was her process of grieving. It wasn't necessarily the specifics in there of the baby or their pregnancy itself, but it was honoring her loss. It was also recognizing that it was about her. And I want to add this, and then we'll look at this question here, is because
I just want to say one thing too about a couple of what you said.
let me just add in that someone asked about what to do for someone else. And the reason I say this is because many of these translate. If you want to give to tzedakah in honor of someone else, if you want to mail them a card, it's been 30 days. And traditionally we kind of recognize that. I'm thinking of you in this moment. If you want to plant a tree and say, I'm doing this and I'm thinking of you. And also just listening to all these things that we're saying and recognizing that that is what someone needs. I just want to put that plug in there, and go ahead, Riva. I'm going to read what this question is.
All right, just a couple things to say. So the tzedakah is a very important aspect of it too, because we give back and we see things. So it's been wonderful to see a lot of our clients, and we, Nechama Comfort, can offer help in creating. Many of them have created their own, we call branches through Nechama Comfort, that they've raised money, which has shared two things. They were able to express their loss to their family and friends by writing up what happened and raising money that they designated for specific causes. We have people that are creating funding to help to bury, whatever the costs are in their town. We have people raising money for comfort care packages, which is something we offer that could, if you want to purchase or to send to another family. So people really are giving back, and we offer many ideas if they want to reach out to us too. So that's so important about giving back. And that's what I think, how you started your organization. How are you going to help by giving back, and how I started mine as well. And just one last thing I didn't mention, which coincides a lot with October, is we just finished Simchat Torah, which many of the holidays, as we know, are involved children. And we need to recognize that as well. And one thing that many communities have done are, before the Kol Ha'Na'arim, before the blessing of the children in the services, is they've stopped beforehand and they've recognized by creating a special prayer and to show really the circle of life. And what was beautiful, and I saw that in my synagogue, was people who were silent about their losses, did not have to share it. People that have been public about, all gathered to recite this prayer. And then the next step was to go into the blessing of the children. So throughout the holidays, throughout our Jewish cycle, there's ways to help to acknowledge these families and to reach out and to help.
Thank you. Those are important. Take a peek, Riva, at the questions in there. There's some. I'm just going to pick out a couple of them, and then maybe you can take some of the other. One of them.
I don't see the questions.
It's in the chat. I'll name some of them and I'll read them to you. So one of them is about what are Jewish rituals and traditions for laying the fetus properly. So the one thing I would say about that, if you're going through this directly, is if there is a Jewish funeral director in your area, contact them immediately. And if they don't know, contact me. In the Bay Area, we have an amazing program through Sinai Memorial Chapel, and our Jewish Family and Children's Services works to help hospitals deal with those remains. If the miscarriage is done at home, to work with them. They can be married, it can be taken care of. The funeral director would be the first call to do for that. In terms of dealing with them Jewishly properly, there's not a very clear answer on that. So it's going to depend on who you ask. You can speak to your rabbi. They can be put in a Jewish cemetery. Usually there is a special section where that is done, but if you're going through the miscarriage now, that would be that call, or contact me or Nechama for us to help you and your community do with that. And then the other question, which I don't think you'll like my answer, when it says, can you address the experience of feeling unsupported by medical professionals, minimizing the emotional loss and the physical pain that can come after miscarriage? So there's a couple things about it. One, I work a lot with many doctors dealing with this. And one of the complaints, for example, I hear a lot about reproductive endocrinologists is all they care about is their statistics. And I think to myself, well, I'm glad they do, because if they have good statistics, it means you have a baby. That's what we want. And part of it is, again, I apologize if I'm trying to say this as sensitively as possible. They're not trained to be counselors. They're trained to be those scientists and those medical professionals. And it's hard to depend on them. That's not what we go to them for. I think you can certainly give your feedback to them. But sometimes the best doctors are because they are technically really good at what they do. That doesn't mean they have the best bedside manner. So it's really, I feel terrible saying this, but part of it is be respectful and understanding that may not be their expertise and it's kind of hard. However, they should be told not to be insensitive. I also have spoken to many doctors about this. And one of the conflicts they have is because a lot of medical research has shown that the sooner after a miscarriage that you get pregnant, actually the more success your body has, because your body actually is primed. So they have this conflicting role of wanting to give you good medical advice, which can seem extremely dismissive of your experience, to say, just try again. Because, ouch, oh my gosh, I need to mourn. It's so horrible. And they could deliver that in a really horrible way. And the reality is, in their mindset, they're being so helpful to you because they're saying everything says that this can work again. And in their mind, the goal is about, again, you taking home a baby. So they think they're being helpful by saying, try as soon as you can, because medically that's often good advice. But to you emotionally, it's like, how could you be so cold and unfeeling? I'm mourning here. So part of it is just understanding the tension that doctors have about, I'm trying to, this is what I'm supposed to do and what I'm really good at. And I might not be addressing this right now. So I hope that that's maybe not like helpful advice, but maybe it's some context to deal with that. Riva, do you want to jump in and add anything?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And that's why it's so important to the couple. We speak to the couple, when it's appropriate, when they bring it up to us that they want to try again. Were you happy with your medical team? And again, it's your choice, yes or no. So if you are, wonderful. And if you're not, let's try to find, another medical team that could help. And, we don't give medical advice, but we ask those questions. Are you happy with the medical team? And do you have your support in place? Because again, you are going to hear the way the doctors talk. And I agree with you so much of what they're doing and how important it is. But you also need to have your counseling in place, your emotional, your partner in place, your family support. And that's why it's so important to share and to reach out and to find the help. So many, more now than ever, we're getting calls, and we're going to start a new group, Pregnancy After Loss. And I just was at this conference and heard there's an app now for pregnancy after loss that people see. So we agree with you out there. And you need to have your team, your total team in place and your support.
So I want to give I'm conscious of the time and we need to wrap up. I'm going to close actually by, to some degree, answering someone's question. We had one more question about sometimes, like when a doctor may minimize the emotional loss and that the physical pain that can come after. And I want to close just by recognizing, first of all, Riva, it is a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I learned something whenever we talk. It was so helpful. And I think a theme of what you said, and I know what I believe kind of comes through here, is recognizing you have the choices. One of those choices is if you want to listen. If you feel that your pain is being minimized and the experience you're going through, you also have a choice to disregard that advice and feel what you need to feel and take care of yourself. You have the choice to say, I don't accept that. This is painful and this is hard and I need to feel bad for a moment. And maybe you're not ready then to try again. And you may think that you just kind of go through a miscarriage and move on. It is okay. You have the choice to say, I need to be present. I need to feel this. The physical pain is real. And to some degree for me, it kind of concretized in I don't want to say positive way, but it made it real. I think that's part of what I took away from you is one of our biggest choices is that we're going to stop and recognize this. We know that miscarriage and loss, it's not just something that happens. It's something you go through. It's something you experience. And the most direct path to healing is to be present with it, to address it, acknowledge it, and move through it. It's a bit of a dance back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
And if you do have any questions, I want to stress, I think that we're going to get in the, yes, wonderful. Thank you, Meira, for putting those in there. Ways to contact either Riva or myself. If you have any follow-up questions, I know we're both happy to answer, to refer, to support you in any way possible. So thank you to everyone who came. Thank you again, Riva, for your expertise, for your experience, for your kindness and your love and support of everyone who goes through this. Thank you for giving back. You're the model of having given back as a way for you to continue to work through this.